Okay. Thanks everybody for joining. Today we're going to be covering the day 3 of the Automation Studio Bootcamp. We're going to be covering the extract, transform, and load process in Automation Studio. My name is Tim Zeider. I work for Cervelo. We are a Salesforce partner helping firms stand up marketing automation solutions that suit their needs. Let's talk about the upcoming sessions. On Tuesday of next week, we've got a SQL query masterclass. We'll be digging into the basics of SQL, doing some advanced functionality, and also some different send options in Automation Studio. They got a couple more sessions following after that. Definitely stay tuned and enjoy. We've also got hands-on sessions every Wednesday. Please drop in the chat if you're interested in being a hands-on builder. We will grant you access to a Marketing Cloud environment, and you will build right along with us live. Let's talk about what we're going to be going over today. So we're going to set up our use case of why would we want to use an ETL solution in Automation Studio. We're going to go over the data flow and schema. Then we're going to deep dive into those activities and the ETL process overall with an end-to-end demo walkthrough in Marketing Cloud, and finishing up with 5 tips. All right, let's talk about our scenario. So this is, typically the ETL tool updating all subscribers has to do with preference management. So in our example, Cervelo Bank is struggling to streamline its consent capture between its businesses. They want to stay compliant while be able to market to their subscribers. So the problem is that the Salesforce CRM environment are capturing preferences, but they're not really aligned on the Marketing Cloud side and vice versa. They don't have an automated way to update subscribers in Marketing Cloud versus doing, except for doing like a file upload on a manual basis. And they don't really have any ways to update CRM as well. So we're looking for a solution covering both of those solutions. So the solution we're going to be doing today is leveraging those objects from Salesforce and Marketing Cloud. We are going to build that ETL automation, something that can run on a regular basis. They don't need to manually upload files. We're going to want to take a look at getting visibility into that FTP or the SFTP in Marketing Cloud, doing a FileZilla setup so that you can see those files being transferred in the back end. And then if we can get to it, we're going to try to do some updating of the Salesforce CRM environment as well. And then covering cool Automation Studio activities, query, data extract, file transfer, import activity, and if we can get to it, scripts as well. Okay, let's take a look at this data flow. So this usually typically works between 2 platforms. It can just be in Marketing Cloud, but we like to sort of, broaden our thinking and think about ways we can do this also in Salesforce or other platforms. So we've got, if you attended the Journey Builder Bootcamp, this flow was used in our sort of example of a consent model management. So on the CRM side, it could either be a contact, or in this example, we're using the consent objects to determine the preferences on the CRM side. So we're going to be bringing in that data points in synchronized data extensions in Marketing Cloud. And then we're going to be looking to, in today's session, we want to create an automation, an ETL, that updates all subscribers based on the consent changes that are happening from the Salesforce CRM environment. Now, we can also, if we have time, we're going to do a automation journey that also updates the Salesforce CRM environment as well. But we'll see if we can get to that as well. And just quickly want to just go over the different data points you might need to handle this. Again, this is using the consent model where you'll be seeing the query a little bit later. We have to use the individual object to connect to the contact. And then the content point consent or type is where that consent status is being pulled from, that we're going to want to compare that consent status with the all subscriber status. And if those are not in alignment, we're going to want to update all subscribers. This sort of gives you a little bit of an overview of the data model. If you're just dealing with contacts, this would simply just be your contacts or leads. This would just be your single object here, but we wanted to also cover how you can also use the consent model because that's sort of the preferred path moving forward. Okay, let's talk about the ETL overview of what are the steps for the ETL process. It's 3, right? So extract, transfer, and load. In this example, it's like extract, transfer, and import. But there's a couple more steps you need to build in order to do that process. It first starts with a query. So a query we're going to be creating, we need to identify who are those subscribers that need to be updated in the all subscribers database. So that's the first part. Then we get to the ETL part. So it's the extract. The extract step is going to be taking that data from the data extension you're creating for this query and moving it to a safe house. The transfer or the file transfer activity is going to move it from the safe house to the import folder in your SFTP. That's where we're going to probably bring in FileZilla just so we can take a look at those files being dropped in the import folder. And then last but not least, we're going to be importing those into all subscribers. So that is the load, or in our example, the import part. So those are the 3 main steps of that ETL process, but also surrounded by that, you need to start it off with the query itself. Just a couple of quick call outs or watch outs, take your time when you're setting this up to set this up correctly. You want to work with your developers, with your admins, with everyone to make sure this is set up correctly. You'll want to be mindful of whether you're setting this up on the admin. If you have a parent-child relationship with your business units, typically that's set up on the admin, but it could also be set up on the child business units as well. So be mindful of that. And then also be mindful of the frequency and the occurrence of the automation. Typically, this is a daily event. Typically, it's early in the morning, but it's just something you want to consider for that update as well. Let's quickly go over the FTP tool part. Again, we're going to be going into how to set this up in the system. So what this does give you visibility. Is it necessary? It's not. It's not absolutely critical, but it is helpful to see those files being dropped in the import folder from the file transfer. So you can see the data move step by step to have visibility in that, especially because you're updating subscriber status. It's good to have that and see that data. You can also move those files into a folder on your systems to save that information. That's what that FTP tool will be helpful with. It also can be helpful in other ways when you're looking to transfer data for other use cases. So make sure that you're mindful of those FTP settings, and the access will show you a little bit more into that. And definitely want to save the password that you're using to create those FTP accounts so you don't lose that. Let's talk about the most important step really of the ETL, which is the query, which determines who are those subscribers that need to be updated. So even though it's not part of the ETL process, it's the most important part because this is what you want to accurately determine who needs to be updated. So you want to understand what you'll need for this step is to understand that subscriber preference model. What are those data sources that you're pulling, that you're doing that comparison to all subscribers? What are those statuses that you're going to make that comparison? So a lot to think about. You might want to map out your sort of like that data flow diagram, map out your environments, all the different ways that people can unsubscribe or change that subscriber status, and make sure that it's all being fed in correctly into that ETL process. Couple of watch outs. Validate your query. You can always use Query Studio to do that. If you're in admin or if it's a multi-BU, you might need to use the ENT period for your data extensions. And then also the all subscribers in the query, the underscore subscribers. may only work in admin, give you an accurate picture of those subscribers in the admin business unit. Sometimes the child business unit doesn't display that. There are other paths there, but just to be mindful of that, it's a couple of watch outs. Okay, let's talk about the first part, the extract of the ETL. Extract, like I said, takes that data from that data extension and it moves it to a safe house and more. There's a bunch of other functionality that data extracts can do for you, but in this example, we just want to focus on that use case. So what you need is you need a data extension external key to identify for this extract, what's the data extension that we're pulling this data from. You're going to want to use the following naming pattern. It starts here with this underscore, so %%year, %%, month, day, .csv. You'll see that carried throughout as well. Just make sure you want to follow that, you know, that process of naming conventional, just make everything easier. You're going to want to select the data extension extract type. According to the notes, a data extension extract type doesn't guarantee those extracted rows of data will be in the same order. So if that is a use case that you need to be concerned about, you know, reach out to your rep. There are custom extracts that can handle that. And sort of created a link here for the other use cases for data extracts. There's quite a few and definitely worth checking out. The key part, the file transfer. So this is taking this file that the extract dropped into a Salesforce Marketing Cloud Safe House, and it's dropping this into your import folder in your SFTP. So very cool, because you can actually see this happen when you're testing your automation. Oftentimes it's good to do that before you actually go to the import part. You create your data extract, you create your file transfer, you run just those two options. You should be able to see that file, first of all, see that data extension get populated, and then in like a minute, you should see that file populate in that import folder. We'll see that today. We'll go through that. So what do you need to do this? You need that file in the safe house. Obviously, you need that data extract step first. A couple of watch outs, make sure you use that same naming convention, select the exact target enhanced FTP destination, and then just always good to validate that that file drops into the import folder. You can put it into a different folder to check to see if that's correct. Always a good step just to check your data. And there are a ton of transfer options. So just like the data extract, these activities have quite a bit of functionality. Again, we're just focusing today on the ETL process. Last step is the import. Then, you know, next to the query, this is probably the most important. So this is importing what you have dropped to that import file in your SFTP, and it's updating, which we're going to be updating today, is all subscribers. You can update, you know, other data extensions. You don't have to just do updates to all subscribers. But this is the, you know, the most fundamental use case where you need to align that subscriber status and you want to update it in all subscribers. What you need is you need that file in the import folder. You also, it's handy to use a CSV to map those fields. We'll walk through that today. And some watch outs, make sure you're using that naming pattern. Make sure you select all subscribers. It's not absolutely clear. We'll walk through that as well. Export that your data extension to a CSV to help map those fields. And also be mindful of the different data action options. We'll walk through that today just because we want to make sure that's set up correctly. Alrighty, those are the tips. We're going to cover that in a second. We are going to go into Marketing Cloud, and let's start here in our ETL that is all set up. So here's that picture that we just shared. We've got the query, the data extract, file transfer, and the import as well. Now we've got this set up in an automation. Just because we are running this manually, we don't have a schedule set up, but typically you want to have that be set up as a schedule to run on a daily basis. So before we dive into the automation itself, let's take a look at FileZilla and how you would set that up. So You don't have to use FileZilla, but we do, and find it to be a very helpful tool, and it's free. So when you download FileZilla, you can see I'm already logged in, but we'll walk through those steps here. So you'd select File, you'd hit Site Manager, and if you already have a site, you're going to want to create a new site. And let's just say this is our test. SFTP. Okay, and then what you're going to want to select is an SSH file transfer protocol. The host, we'll cover that in a second. And then you're going to put in the username and password from your FTP setup. So to get the host syntax, first of all, you need to figure out what stack you're on in Salesforce to follow the syntax that's used in the FTP. And let me just get out of this. We'll go back into this is an FTP that's set up. So you're going to want to follow this syntax for the host. This is the stack address, but you need to determine which stack you're in. So to do that, if you go to let me log into the Salesforce Trust site. So if you log into the Salesforce Trust site, and you're going to go to Marketing Cloud. In our example, we're going to do Marketing Cloud Engagement. And here's where you can put in your MID. So let's go back into Marketing Cloud. I'm going to copy our MID. Go back to the trust site, hit return. And then this will tell you that's that MID. You click in there, and that's where you're going to determine your stack. So you could be on 13, you could be on 2. We are on 1, and that's what you're going to want to modify this URL and just put in whatever your stack number is here. That's your host. Okay, that's part 1. Part 2 is how you're going to determine the user and the password for your FTP location. So to set that up, you're going to want to go into Setup. You go under Data Management, under FTP Accounts, and you can create a new user. It's going to ask you it's going to create a new username, which you'll want to copy. It's going to ask you for a password. And it's going to ask you to set up different levels of access. Pretty straightforward on how to set that up. But you'll want to take that username and that password, and that's what you're going to enter here in the SFTP username and password. You just hit connect, and we'll open this up in a new tab. And there you go. You're connected into the SFTP backend, where you're primarily going to be working out of this import folder for this example. You can see the files that we've been testing. They're here in the import folder. So that's your first step, is to, if you don't already, have connection to your SFTP so you can see that in the backend. And we'll come back here in a second once we start running those files. Let's go back to our automation. Let's take a look at this query. The first step of the process gets the most important part to determine those subscribers that might be out of sync, that need to be updated in the all subscribers environment. So what I typically like to do is to work in Query Studio first to validate. So I think I've got this query here in Query Studio. Definitely recommend getting Query Studio. It's free, and it is just such a fantastic tool for you to visualize and work through your queries, that you can run and populate that data right in front of you. You don't need a data extension. It is incredibly handy and worth getting. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're doing here in this query. So in any query, there's 3 parts, right? There's a select statement. Select statement determines those fields that you're looking to output into a data extension typically. The from statement is where you're getting this data from. And the where clause is how you're filtering on that data. You don't want to include all of the data in your from statement, to sort of gives you an idea of like the specific records you want to pull back. So let's talk about the from statement. Now this aligns to the that schema that we talked about earlier, where if we were just dealing with contacts, you would just have a 2-line statement. You would just remove these 2 joins, and it would just be your contact and your all subscribers, your data view here. But because we're doing a little bit more advanced work today, we're going to be using ultimately this contact point type consent object is the object in our consent model that has the status of the subscriber in the Salesforce CRM environment. So to get to that, status, first of all, you want to start with your subscriber, right? And in this example, we're using the contact ID as our subscriber key. You can sort of see it down here. So that's going to be your first stop for your from statement, is that contact synchronized data extension. Now we're joining the individual, that's sort of the next layer down. In order to connect it to the contact point type object, you need to connect the contact with the individual. So we're just using this on statement, which is going to connect the individual ID on this contact record. There's an individual ID, and that matches the ID of the individual. So that allows these 2 databases to merge, and you can include any of those fields there. And then one more step down, we want to take that on the contact point type consent object, there's a field called party ID, and that matches the individual ID. So that's where we're using that for the on statement to make that match. And then last but not least, we want to join our data view of the all subscribers underscore subscribers back to that contact. And we have in all subscribers this subscriber key value, which should equal the subscriber key on that contact, or the contact ID itself. And so that's how we're going to bring all that data together, so that we can go right down to that consent type, contact point consent type status. And then on the select statement, we're just outputting some key values that we need to modify the subscriber status for this individual. So for this example, we've got a subscriber key, we've got an email address. So we're definitely going to need that subscriber key. And then really the only value that we're going to need to make an update to all subscribers is this status field. We want to say to all subscribers, for this subscriber key, we want to change it to whatever our plan is. In this query, we're changing it to unsubscribed. We have also in this select statement, this privacy consent status. We just wanted to get that outputted so that we could see the comparison for our use case. So we'll cover that in a second. Just want to cover the where clause. The last part is the where clause, and this is the determiner of when those 2 databases could be out of sync. It should identify like, hey, there's a subscriber here that needs to be updated. So what this is saying is that when that privacy consent status, which is a field on the contact point type consent object, which holds the consent on the Salesforce side, when that is opt-in, meaning they want to receive communications, and the subscriber, the all subscriber status is unsubscribed, that's when we want to say like, hey, these 2 databases are out of sync. We want to update this status to active. So you can see down here, this is the status in Marketing Cloud. It is confirmed as unsubscribed, right? Actually, that's showing unsubscribed. Let me just change this to s.status. We should be able to see that s.status. Just run that real quick. We should be able to see that status in all subscribers there. And then the other field that we were looking at is that privacy consent status, which should show you that record here that we're pulling in, so you can sort of visually see the comparison working. Sometimes it takes a minute when you're adjoining all subscribers because it's doing, depending on, if you add a couple of different joins to your query, it can take a little bit of time, but hopefully this takes less than a minute, then we can see that data populated. If not, we can come back. We'll just give it a second or two. Any questions so far on what we've covered as far as the ETL process? Have others done this before in your environment? Is this something that's familiar with folks? Okay. Well, throw out those comments in the chat. But here's the data, right? So now we can see with that s.status, we are pulling the subscriber status from all subscribers. You can see it's unsubscribed. We're pulling in that subscriber status from Salesforce CRM, and that is opted in. So that shows these two and shows them that they're out of sync. So that's our validation of the query. Looks like it's working as expected. Again, this is just for this use case. For your use case, you might want to have it be a little bit more, checking a bunch of different statuses, but we just wanted to use this as an example in our model. So if we go back to our automation, you can see I've made this updated where for this scenario, if they're opted in on the Salesforce side, but they're unsubscribed in Marketing Cloud, we're going to want to change that status to active. We want to force it as active. So that's what this query is going to do when it runs. So there's the query. And again, we are populating this data extension, this Privacy Center Consent ETL data extension. Let's just take a look at this data extension. You'll probably want it to be for sending if you're using it maybe for journeys. It may not absolutely be needed for the import process to be for sending, but sometimes that's needed. It's a relatively straightforward data extension in that we've only got 4 fields in here. The 2 really key fields are the subscriber key and the status to determine what should be populated here that the all subscribers is going to be updated to. So we should see that be active when that actually runs. Okay, and it's also important to note, we're coming back when we go to the data extract. This is the external key that the data extract will be using. So let's go back into the automation. That covers that first step. Let's go into our next step, really the beginning of the data extract, the ETL process. Now to do this, I think what we'll do is, I think we'll just create this from scratch just to walk you through how to do it, that setup. So let's just pull in this data extract. One thing that I want to do before I do that, I just want to pull this naming convention, put this in a notepad just so that I have that for all of our examples. Let me cancel out of that. And let me just put this in a notepad real quick so I can reference it, be using this a couple of times. Okay, so let's go. We're going to just drop this data extension activity into our canvas. We're going to create a new data extract activity. We'll just call this test data extract. And a key will be populated there if you don't need to. If you want it, it'll automatically get populated. That's where we want to paste in that naming convention. Again, it gives you that breakdown there, but it's also good to know that you want to have that be a .csv at the end. We want to select the data extension extract. You could add a description here just because we don't have a lot of time today. We'll skip that part. And then this is where you want to put in that data extension key. So we want to go back to our data extension. We want to copy that key and we want to paste that in there. That's the most important part of 2 parts really of this data extract. You also want to make sure that these are all selected. Is you want to make sure that you put in the right data extension key. That's what's going to point to the data. So it pulls it in correctly. And you want to make sure you've got that file naming convention pattern accurately. So that's it for the data extract, super easy. let's go into the next step, which is the file transfer. So we'll pull in our file transfer. And also relatively easy to set this up as well. We're going to create a new file transfer. Just call this test_file transfer. Again, the external key will be populated. We want to move the file from the safe house for this example. And then let's copy that file naming pattern. Paste that there. And it automatically pulls up the exact target. It's enhanced FTP. You can see there's quite a few other options there. We can hit next. And that's it. So super easy to set up the file transfer. Again, it's just telling you the name of that file that you want to populate in the import file. And this is what it's going to be looking for in the safe house, that file naming convention that you just created with your data extract. So we're going to cancel out of that. Again, relatively easy to set that up. The import part is a little bit more involved, a little more complicated. So let's walk through that. So we're going to select, create a new import item. So we'll just do a test import. And you can send a notification to, so I'll send it to myself whenever that happens. That's kind of handy. We're going to want to use a file location. It automatically pulls up the exact target enhanced FTP. It automatically pulls up that import folder, which is handy. So you have visibility in the import folder to see into that import folder. So this is where you don't absolutely need FileZilla to see it. And this is also helpful reason why before you even set up your import activity to run the first two steps of the data extract and the file import, the file transfer, so that you can actually see the files in here to verify that. So we're just going to paste in that same naming convention, and this says, "Yep, I see a file that named in this import folder. That all looks good." We're going to select next. This is where you're going to want to select the file that you want to upload, and there's a lot of options here. And it's not super easy, but you want to make sure you select all subscribers, at least for this example, when you're updating all subscribers. So it's kind of hidden under my subscribers. It's probably different in every business unit, but make sure you're clearly select all subscribers. And then the last part is making sure that you're mapping the fields that you're pulling in from that data extension. So we're going to want to do a map manually. We're going to want to update only. Now, to map this, you're going to want to choose a file to do that. And what you can do is go back to your data extension. And if you go into the records, whether it's populated or not, but probably better just to populate at least one record, and we can export this. We're going to export it to a browser download, hit export, and let's go to that file. Well, it's now that it's downloaded, we can access it in the import activity. So we're going to choose that file. We're going to choose our downloaded items, select it. And here are those fields, right? The subscriber key, the status. We've got this created date that we don't really need, but let's just map these fields. So subscriber key goes with subscriber key. You can see that match. That looks good. Email address, not critical for this update, but just good to have anyways. And then status. We want to make sure that's the all important one that we get that updated and selected there. So that's how you can map your fields. Again, if you're doing a lot more updating, there'll be quite more fields to map there. And you also want to be mindful of your data action, add only, update only, and add an update. So in this example, we are updating existing subscribers in Marketing Cloud. We don't really want to add one. We just want to find one that's existing and updated. That's how we're trying to align those two databases. So that's why we're using update only. And that's it. That's how you set that up. It'll give you a sort of a replay of all your settings there, and that's how you do the import activity. Cool. So let's just refresh this and let's run this and see how this all works together. So first off, let's go to this subscriber, and I just want to show in all subscribers that it is unsubscribed. And we see it here, but it's always good just to double check. So here we are in all subscribers. I probably need to refresh. Sometimes all subscribers does time out. You know, different ways you can take a look at all subscribers. If you want to find it, it's under subscribers in Email Studio and all subscribers. We're going to hit search. We are going to search by that subscriber key and see if we can find it and see if we can check to see this should have a red shirt. It should be unsubscribed. Okay, so there we are, unsubscribed. If you're familiar with the different shirts, that is the use case that we're seeing from this query. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to run this automation. First of all, let's just clear out this data extension just to be sure. We'll clear out this data. Again, this is what the query is running when we run it. And we're just going to do a run once and run all of these activities. You know, typically you want to just do the data extract and file transfer to see the file get populated in the SFTP. But just to save time today, we're going to run all of them. So we're going to select all activities. We're going to run the query, the extract, the file transfer, and the import. We're going to select run. It shows you all of those ones that you're running. And if you're not running, it'll show you what's not running. And then you can add email addresses if you want for once it's complete, but typically it's only when there's an error you want to run that. And we'll run. So then we're going to go to the activity tab. You can see I ran this earlier today just to test it. And here's where you can sit here and sort of, I call it like watching the paint dry. You can sort of refresh and see how the activity is running through each step along the way. So while we're waiting for this to run, I just want to go back into the slides and we can cover some of the tips I think that we've covered today a little bit, and then we'll go right back into Marketing Cloud. So definitely feel like it's helpful to get that FileZilla or some FTP tool. Relatively easy to set that up. And so you have visibility into those import and export files. You will, folders, you will use it for your ETL process. You will use it for a lot of other processes as well. Don't forget about that naming convention. Just make sure you follow that best practices and carry that all throughout, because you're creating files under that naming convention. You're going to want to transfer that exact file, and you're going to want to import that exact file. Use Query Studio. It's free, great, easy way to validate all of your queries and all of your logic. That all-important query, use Query Studio to make sure that that is what you're expecting. Check your data before uploading it to all subscribers. Like how we're just sort of working through one subscriber right here. You know, play around with it, make sure it's working as expected before you start uploading larger batches. And even when you start going to the larger batches, make sure you just sort of continue to test larger quantities to make sure it works as expected. And make sure that you're selecting all subscribers. You could sort of see as we work through that, it wasn't absolutely critically clear, but you want to make sure that you're selecting all subscribers so that you're updating that file correctly. All righty, let's go back to our automation. Let's see where we are at. Okay, so we've got all of those activities have worked correctly. No red errors. So let's go back to all subscribers real quick and let's test this again to see if they've changed to, well, you know what, let's go to the data extension first and see, hopefully that this data extension is now populated. We've got one record in there. And yep, so it's populated with that active status. So that hopefully, to go back into all subscribers, should change this subscriber from a red shirt to a green shirt in all subscribers. And there we go. It you know, resubscribed. So there you go. They can sort of see that process end to end being updated. Now let's also go into FileZilla. And let's just see if we can refresh this. Sometimes it takes a second for that file to populate. Okay, so here we go, 11:14. And we're looking for 7:50 a.m. That looks like the file we just uploaded. So there it is, there's that file. Now what you can do is you can take this file, maybe it was the 8:40. 8:43. That's actually looks like it's real time. So we're going to take this file. We're going to drop it over here. I've got a file in my, on my computer where I want to actually take a look at this data. So let me pull up this, this folder. There's that file. Let's click into this file and take a look at it. Let's see what, and there it is. There's that data. Great to see that, right? I mean, you're actually seeing the file that's being used to update all subscribers. So obviously in this case, it's just one record. But if you're updating thousands of records, it's just good to validate and just to see your data before it gets updated into that all important all subscribers. And that's what that FTP can help you do on that end. That's pretty much it end to end on how to build an ETL in Marketing Cloud, how to do those three-step processes. Any questions from anybody on what we just covered? Anything we could do a deep dive a little bit more in detail about? Okay, well, if there aren't any questions, thank you for joining. Definitely explore that ETL tool in Automation Studio, get familiar with it, experiment with it, you can play around. You don't necessarily have to use Salesforce data. You can use, a data extension that you create just to validate that. You can change the subscriber status on a case-by-case basis. You can toggle it from unsubscribed to active and play around with it, make sure that functionality works as expected. And then before you roll it out to the rest of the business units or the enterprise, et cetera. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We will see you in our next hands-on session, which is, our next bootcamp session, which is on Tuesday. Thanks for joining.